Hi, my name is Larry Ferlazzo, and it's great to be here today. The title of my presentation is going to be, We Will Either Find a Way or Make One, Overcoming COVID-19 Challenges Facing ELLs and Their Teachers. The outline of my presentation is going to be focused on 4 questions. And these questions are particularly relevant during the COVID-19 crisis, but that they are also relevant beyond. And these are questions that are particularly facing ELL teachers, but are also facing the whole education world. The first question is, how can we best support English language learners who are in our own ELL classes during this crisis? The second one is, how can we best support English language learners when they are in mainstream classes during this crisis? Number 3, how can we best support English language learners and their families when they are at home during this crisis? And finally, how can we best support and maximize the assets brought by English language learners and their teachers so their presence can improve school-wide teaching and learning during this crisis? And again, all these questions and their answers are relevant beyond COVID-19. So in addition to using the frame of these 4 questions, I'm going to answer them in the context of using do's and don'ts. So the first one is, how can we best support English language learners who are in our own ELL classes during this crisis? Do focus on relationships immediately and heavily. Don't just do whatever you and I usually do at the beginning of the year. Do a lot more. So one of the challenges that we face during this time is that students are not necessarily going to be required to be in our classroom every day, which means that alternatives are going to be much more easily within their grasp. Whether it is TV, a movie, video game, sleeping late. So we want to look at how we can develop intrinsic motivation. And one of the key elements of intrinsic motivation is relatedness. Is what we're doing going to bring us in relationship with someone who we respect or like? So in terms of developing those relationships, we got to front load that at this point, right? And one way to do that is to have lots of socially distanced individual meetings in class, both with the teacher and student student to student. We can ask these kinds of questions. What were their best experiences in school, and why were they so good? What were their worst experiences in school, and why were they so bad? What do they like to do in their free time, and what do they like about those activities? What is their favorite subject and why? What are their future goals? We also definitely want to hear about our students' immigration experience, if they are indeed immigrants. And but one of the problems is they've been here for a year or two. They've been asked that question a zillion times by teachers. So we can hopefully invite them to respond in more innovative ways, a little different. For example, maybe draw in a comic strip form, or auto narrate a animation about their immigration experience. Or if they're not sick and tired of it, we can just have them tell us about it. Of course, if you are in a situation where you're teaching remotely, we can also do individual meetings and ask students these questions. One of the things that I did last spring is I taught my newcomers class a live class each day, but once a week I had individual 15-minute video conferences with each student in the class, not only talking about their schoolwork, but the challenges they were facing, how were they feeling. That we need to really focus on that kind of relationship building, either online or in person. I was mentioning relatedness is one of the key elements that are necessary to create the conditions for intrinsic motivation. Relevance is another important element. And with the information that we gain out of these relationship building activities, we can also apply that to make the lessons that we prepare for our students more relevant to their lives and their goals. Autonomy is another element of intrinsic motivation. Do students have some control over what they do and when they do it? We'll talk a little bit more in this presentation about how we can make that a reality. And then competency. How can we help students feel like they have the abilities, that they have the support, that they have the scaffolding to do what they are being asked to do? So those are the 4 elements of intrinsic motivation that undergird all of the responses that I am making to these questions during the presentation today. So do have those individual meetings with students. Don't just rely on class interaction. Do emphasize online cooperation very heavily. Rely less on students producing individual work. Not never, but just less than before. Again, we really need to focus on engagement. The alternatives that students have are going to be very enticing. So it doesn't necessarily mean that all the work has to be collective, okay, or being done in partners or in groups. But we need to focus on engagement, okay? We can come up with lots of great activities in our class all the time, but it's not going to help our students if they don't do it. So, especially if we're in a hybrid situation or just remote learning, creating opportunities where students, if they want, can work together in groups or pairs on projects. We can obviously give students who don't want to work with another partner an option to do it on their own. But, relatedness is a key element of intrinsic motivation. Here are a few key tools that I have found useful for students to work online simultaneously. There are lots of different apps that allow students to work on joint projects, but not at the same time. And what I found in the spring, both with my newcomers class and my more advanced classes, is students working on projects simultaneously while either having a video conference call going on or FaceTime, working on it together, really maximized engagement. The tools that I have found most useful, and there aren't that many tools out there that allow that kind of simultaneous work together, are obviously Google Slides, Google Doc. Google Doc, people can make posters, slides, prepare presentations. Google Drawings, make comic strips. Padlet is really good. I've had students take pictures of different signs and then put them in category. What are signs that are informative? What are warning signs? Book Creator is great for students who want to create their own books together. Do make your curriculum student-driven. Don't just use your usual stuff. When we were doing remote learning in the spring, I started off by just asking students, what do you want to learn about? Ordinarily I was at a time when we were going to be doing a unit on health and then work on writing stories. But by asking students what what they wanted to learn about. They wanted to learn about coronavirus, about jobs, about our military. Some of them were part of JROTC. And it was a pretty highly engaged class. We're lucky as ELL teachers. We can pretty much use any topic to teach English. Okay? We may be used to doing it, a certain way and doing certain themes, but again, it doesn't help if students don't do it. Okay? Will that create more work for us? Yes. But we got to do what we got to do. I talked earlier about student autonomy as an important element of student intrinsic motivation. So for homework, for example, giving students a variety of options. I told students that they could spend 15 minutes a day on any one of these choices. Brain Pop, Raz Kids, Epic, USA Learns, Read Works, Common Lit, Duolingo. Most offer free options, some low-cost options, and others more costly. But the key is offering choice. Do teach online synchronous classes differently than if you're in the classroom. Don't teach like you're in the classroom. I sat in several virtual classrooms in the spring from teachers that I know are great teachers in the classroom, and they try to teach their classes the same way online. It didn't work. We've got to make it very engaging. What I try to do is at the minimum every 2 to 3 minutes asking students that they had to do something in response, either repeat something chorally, write something in the chat window, draw something and raise it up to the webcam so that we could see. I had online games like quizzes that would reinforce something that we had just taught. Having students everybody have virtual whiteboards. They had to write a response. But we have to put a lot of energy. At least I found that I had to put a lot more energy into my online classes than I did in physical classroom. That I had to be more of a performer as well as a teacher. Focus on giving feedback, less focus on grades. Okay, using grades as a cudgel is not really what's going to be energizing the students in this time. Focusing in on feedback, on how students can write a little better, how they can speak a little better, how can they listen a little better. That I'm not a hard grader, and I certainly am not a hard grader during this crisis. And it's not going to kill us or students to put a little less pressure on grades and probably make it a little more engaging for them, especially if we focus on those 4 elements of intrinsic motivation. Focus on equity, not equality. My big gripe for the spring is we treated all students the same way, right? That my English language learners and my advanced students in the IB program, that really the students in the most vulnerable populations, like English language learners, special ed, students in danger of failure, these are the students that require our assistance the most. So, fight to try to get them to be in class physically 5 days a week if you're in a hybrid situation. That's what I'm trying to fight for. As opposed to most students in class 2 days a week and 2 days online. Finally, accept that we're going to flop sometimes. We're going to do it our best, but we're all human. Let's not beat ourselves up. But let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. Focusing on equity. Is it perfect that only, just the ELLs and special ed and students that might be, in danger of failure. They're the ones that are on campus 5 days a week and everybody else is on 2 days a week. Is that an ideal world? No. But we're not in a situation where we can be in a perfect world, where we have to function in the world as it is, not as how we'd like it to be. Second question, how can we best support ELLs when they are in mainstream classes during this crisis? So what is the advice that we can give to our colleagues? We can help teachers understand that scaffolding strategies supporting ELL support all students. Good ELL teaching is good for everybody. Okay, teachers are going to be feeling pressured these days. They only need one more thing to do. So by helping them to see that it's in their self-interest and the self-interest of all their students to follow our advice is going to be key. We don't want to accept a brush off. We want to encourage our colleagues to use graphic organizers and writing frames and structures. We want to discourage our colleagues from having a sink or swim attitude with our with our students. Using graphic organizers to help students organize their work. Writing frames, which are basically extended sentence starters. Fill in the blanks. Writing structures, which are not fill in the blanks, but give students clues what they have to write where. And these are great differentiation tools for teachers. Some students don't need any of them. Some more advanced students could use writing structures. Newer students could use writing frames. Model. We want to encourage our colleagues to model and don't just use rubrics. Lots of research shows that modeling, giving students examples of work that teachers created from previous years, is more effective than using rubrics. Doesn't mean you can't use both, but if you're going to use one or the other, put your time on one or the other, have it on creating models. Encourage our colleagues to use closed captioning when showing videos to the class and slow down video speed. It's easy to do that. Students in the IB program, they want me to slow down these videos. I can't imagine why these folks speak so fast. The crash course guy talks so fast. Students in the back of the room always want to have closed captions so they can see the words. Let's discourage our colleagues from showing videos without support. Do encourage our colleagues to use Microsoft Translator or Google Interpreter to communicate with students. Microsoft Translator is this great chat tool where if I'm speaking in English, it will automatically type out what I'm saying in English so I see it. But then if someone else is on the same tool and they have their language for Spanish or Mandarin, it will automatically and simultaneously print out what I say in their home language. Google Interpreter is great if you download the Google Assistant app and say, for example, interpret Spanish. It will have in a conversation, it'll automatically say what I say in Spanish and what the other person says back to me, Spanish to English. They're great tools. Don't let our colleagues use the excuse that they can't communicate with students. Do engineer the text. The idea is amplify, not simplify all the time. Sometimes you want to simplify it, but engineering the text to make text more accessible to everybody. We want to discourage our colleagues from just copying textbooks or worksheets as is. Here's an example from Carmen Nguyen. She's given me permission to use this in presentations. On the left, you see the text as it was originally, and you see how it's been engineered or adapted with images, with definitions, with bold-faced titles. Okay, it hasn't been simplified, it has been amplified. We want to encourage our colleagues to think about the prior knowledge students need in order to access the lesson. There's lots of resources out there that would help students. When I teach world history, the week before I'm going to teach that, I either ask students to watch a Brain Pop video in Spanish about the topic, or there are lots of textbooks online, may not be the text that I'm using, but it covers the same topic, that has chapter summaries in multiple languages that students can read before. Math teachers can have students watch Khan Academy videos in their languages. It just requires a little bit of prior planning. We want to discourage our colleagues from making assumptions about the prior knowledge our students might have. We want to encourage our colleagues to try putting themselves in the shoes of our English language learners. We want to encourage them to show empathy. Doesn't mean they have to be perfect. We want them to just think about it, be aware. Next question. How can we best support ELLs and their families when they are at home during this crisis? First and most important thing, we want to acknowledge the parents that they are doing the most important job in supporting their students now, modeling how to face adversity with courage and compassion. There's nothing more important that they can do to support their children right now than that. We don't want to guilt trip our parents. Hey, listen, so many of our parents may be unemployed. They're essential workers that are in danger of getting infected with COVID-19. They're in danger of being evicted. Our parents need our support, not guilt. But that doesn't mean we can't offer a few simple suggestions. It does mean that we don't want to give a long laundry list of ideas. Here are a few simple suggestions we can offer to parents. Just asking their children what they did in school that day. Research has shown that one of the most effective things that parents can do to support their children's academic achievement is just by talking to them about what they learned in school. Hey, listen, I've got kids. Asking them what they did in school today, oftentimes the answer is nothing, right? But we can encourage parents to ask more specific questions. What was the most interesting thing you learned in math today? What were the 3 most interesting things you learned in science? Parents can read with their children in English or in their home language. As we all know, plenty of research shows that supporting a student's home language supports their acquisition of English. Parents can tell their children stories about their family history. Again, research has shown that doing that strengthens students' self-identity and confidence. Talk about family adventures that parents, grandparents, great-grandparents have taken, or misadventures. And if possible, set up a regular place and time for their child to do schoolwork. In some situations, that's not going to be possible, but it might be worth just putting it out there. This is a nice infographic made by Wendy Pillars that's also available in Spanish on my blog. The final question is, how can we best support and maximize the assets brought by ELLs so their presence can improve school-wide teaching and learning during this crisis? And what we as ELL teachers can do is model that good ELL teaching is good for everybody and continue to talk with administration and colleagues and we can challenge inequities, including racism. What we don't want to do is get sucked into complaining about how hard teaching is going to be this year and whine about it. Except it's okay to whine about it to our immediate family members. I certainly will be doing it with my wife. But let's try not to do that this year. Good luck to us all.